Alrighty. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Isaac Carone. I work here at Wild Birds Unlimited. I'm a student at Iowa State University. I currently study animal ecology, and I'm hoping to graduate end of this year. So that's exciting, something I'm looking forward to.
That means December or?
May. End
Oh,
of
okay.
May, yeah. Today's program is on waterfowl, specifically the fall migration, which we're a little bit behind now, but as timing is, we're just at that time of year, so it's a little bit late, but there's still some stuff migrating through, so yeah. Decided I really wanted to do this program just because I started to get really into ducks, and geese are pretty cool too, but I really like ducks, and so I wanted to see a lot more ducks, so I was like, I'm going to share some education with y'all, and hopefully you get involved and go see some ducks. So, what is migration? So migration is when animals periodically move from one range or habitat to another, usually during different seasons of the year because they're searching different things. These things include going after food resources, going for more habitable climate, so like once temperature starts to drop and the time of day starts to lessen, they're going to migrate down south to where they have more food resources, warmer climate, and they have longer day length. How do these birds prepare for migration? It's to eat a lot. Eat a lot. They will eat like 30 to 50% more than they usually do just to build up fat reserves so they can fly long distances and make those migrations. So, why are open water sources important? Here in Ames, we're really lucky because there's a lot of close nearby like wetlands, open ponds, lakes, and marshes, and even the Colo bogs that are super nice for migrating waterfowl this time of year. But the reason these are important is because they offer these benefits, including water, shelter, food, breeding and nesting sites. So when they're coming back up in the spring, they stop over, and that's where they build their nest and raise their young. And then the most important for fall migration is resting or a place to stop over, because sometimes you need those stopover places if you're migrating from like Central and South America all the way up to Canada and the northern regions. You really need a place to stop over, fill up with some food, take a break, because you've exhausted your fat reserves and you just need to get some energy. So, these are some examples of local places nearby. Almost all of these are like within 50 miles. So if you're ever looking for a place to go look for waterfowl or just birds in general, these are really great places. I'm sure many of you guys have been to Ada Hayden. That's where we're going to go today. I recently was at Big Creek and Sailorville Lake looking for loons. Sadly did not see any because I'm plagued by windy weather whenever I go out. But I inspire you guys to go check these places out because they're phenomenal. Bajork Marsh has a lot of water in it currently, and that is west towards Boone. It's fantastic. I've seen a lot of cool stuff out there, not just waterfowl, so I highly recommend that area. Okay, now I'm going to get to the identification part of our program. So I'm just going to go through all sorts of geese, swans, and ducks, how to identify them, what to look for, and when we can kind of see them. Before we hop into specific ducks, there's two main groupings of ducks that we have. We have our dabbling ducks and our diving ducks. So dabbling ducks are ducks that kind of skim the water surface, or will just stick their heads underneath a little bit. Their whole body will not submerge the water. They'll kind of flip upside down with usually their tail sticking up to feed. And so what they do this for is just to skim plant matter or insects off the surface, or they'll go underwater a little bit just to get like mollusks, other aquatic invertebrates to eat. Example of these are mallards that we see all the time, bright green face, really pretty. Northern shovelers get the huge big beak that they use for shoveling and all that plant matter and stuff, including duckweed. We have northern pintails, very beautiful duck. Wood ducks, which I know are a favorite of some of our members here today, and our blue and green-winged teal, with some of our smallest duck species. Examples of our diving ducks, which are ducks that actually submerge their entire body in the water. They will go down into the water, feed on the ground, and pull up plant matter and other invertebrates to eat. So those guys are our Buffleheads, our Canvasbacks, Ruddy Ducks, which is one I've been looking to find because they're beautiful with the bright blue bill, Ringneck Ducks, and Goldeneyes. The difference between the dabbling and diving ducks, not just in feeding habit, but it's the way they are built physically. Usually their leg position, and then how they get into the water. So with dabbling ducks, their feet are more placed in the center of their body, I believe. Yes. Dabbling ducks, their feet are placed more in the center of their body because they don't really need that back propulsion, how they propel themselves in the water once they get in there. And they just kind of sit on them. But it also helps them for takeoff because with dabbling ducks, they really don't need much of a runway. They can pretty much just take off straight from the water when it comes to flying. Whereas your diving ducks, they're more anatomically positioned so where their feet are in the hind end of their body. It's really good for kicking and getting down into the water so they can really get down there real far. And because of this, their front half is kind of weighted in a sense. And so when they need to get off of the water surface, they actually have to have like a runway where they'll take 50 to 100 feet or meters and they'll run on the water before they can get up. Our first dabbling duck species we're going to talk about is mallards. I'm sure you guys have all seen a mallard at some point in your life. Probably our most common duck species that we see year-round. Males are distinguished by their bright green heads, and females kind of have this very common female duck look with a real bright brown streak through her eye, which some other female ducks employ, but the purple wing stripe here is a really good factor for being able to identify mallards, if you can see that. It's very visible when they're in flight, but when they're sitting you can also see it, as seen in this picture. They will inhabit pretty much any sort of water source. They eat a lot. Most duck species are going to eat a lot of macroinvertebrates, microinvertebrates, any kind of like animal matter in a sense during the breeding season, but we'll also substitute that for plant matter other times of the year. The protein-rich sources are really important during the breeding season or right before they're taking off to go on their migrations because they need those fat reserves. So, as you can see by the range map here, we have mallards year-round. So, they're very pretty ducks. The standard quack you hear when someone plays a duck call is actually a mallard, but it is a female mallard. The males do not actually have much of a quack sound, more of a raspy kind of quiet sound. And the mallards are very strong flyers. They've been clocked at 55 miles an hour when they're flying overhead, getting from one source of water to the other one. So they're pretty fast flyers. Next we have the American widgeon. There's two widgeon species we have that we have in North America. The American widgeon is the most common, and sometimes rarely we can see the Eurasian widgeon, which I did not feature just because it's kind of a rarity. But they do look similar, so people they kind of know the Eurasian with the American. The American male is distinguished by this real bright green like streak from the eye towards the back of the head, and this little white bald cap he's got going across the top. Whereas the female is a very smaller version. They both have this black tip on the front of their beak, and they have this kind of like mottled looking grayish black on the heads. The American widgeon is also known as the bald pate because the white stripe on the male resembles the baldness of a male, of an individual. So it's kind of a nickname it was given probably a while ago. With their range map, we can see American widgeons, Iowa's here. So we can look to see them during migration season, but we're probably not going to have many to stay for the winter time. So, yeah, they're also one of our dabbling ducks. Next we have our gadwall, probably our least flashy of our duck species. The males and females are very drab colored, which is typical for female ducks, but not so much for males. But there is beauty within the gadwall. He's a very beautiful duck in and of himself. They're distinguished by kind of a brownish black contrast with this mottled look as well on the body. Males tend to have an all black bill, whereas females have an orange black bill. Their ranges as well. We can look to see some gadwalls during the non-breeding season, so migration and wintertime in the southern part of Iowa. But yeah. Gadwalls are also kind of pesky when it comes to feeding. They've been known to steal food from American coots and other diving ducks when they surface. So they'll just kind of like, in like a big raft during migration or winter time, they can be seen with a lot of other ducks and American coots. And they'll just kind of sit and wait for them to come up from the water and then just kind of harass them and steal their food away. They're a little bit lazy sometimes. Northern pintails, a very, very, very beautiful duck. I was fortunate enough to see one a few weeks ago when I was out and about. A pretty reserved duck, I would say. The males are strikingly beautiful. This bright brown head, slender beak, and this white, almost streak coming down from the neck, down to from the back of the neck towards like the main neck part. The super long pin tail is where they get their name from. The females also kind of have a longer tail. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but they tend to have like a longer like feather or two that sticks out from the back in the females. Yeah, they're very pretty ducks. And a range map, you can see, we can look to see northern pintails in migration season. We don't really typically have many that stay around during the winter time. So a few weeks ago, it's been a great time to go out and see them. Yeah. And then this is a picture of a male pintail next to a female mallard. So it's kind of a size comparison, and they just like to hang together. You can kind of gather from the picture, this is what you would see in a raft, which is a group of ducks during like a non-breeding or winter time of year. A lot of groups of ducks like to hang together. Northern pintails have been called the efficient duck, or I have called them as the efficient duck, because they migrate at night at speeds around 48 miles an hour. The longest nonstop flight record for northern pintail was 1,800 miles. Sorry. And when it comes to breeding northern pintails, they really don't like to waste time. They start nesting as soon as the ice starts to thaw. So as soon as temperatures start contrasting white and brown on the sides of the body. Whereas the female, the best way is the bill, just because it's unlike any other duck species you're going to see. For range, you're going to see them during the migration time in Iowa. During the breeding season, they can be a little bit further west, like in Nebraska, when you go see sandhill cranes during the breeding season. And then this is just like a giant mass of northern shovelers. They also will create these little rafts with other duck species, but a lot of northern shovelers congregate together often, so they create these giant masses of ducks. Their bill is about 2.5 inches long, and it's shaped like a shovel, which is super great for picking up plant matter and other macroinvertebrates that are just sitting on the top of the surface of the water. And their bill is special in the fact that it has 110 fine projections along the sides of it. These are called lamellae, and they act like a colander, like a filter that basically takes and brings all of the crustaceans and seeds and stuff like that into their mouth and filters out the water. So, Bluewing teal, one of our smallest duck species, very pretty, very popular with hunters as well. The males are distinguished by the gray head with this white stripe right in front of their eye, between the beak and the eye. Very pretty. Also, like the mallards, they have the coloration on the edge of the wing that you see in the inside of the body. Instead of purple, it's going to be more of a blue color, hence the name Bluewing teal. Females are also pretty drab, look very similar to female mallards with the black eye stripe through their eye. But the best way to tell it's not a female mallard is based on size. If you see them together, they're super small. This picture here shows a male bluewing teal with a male mallard. Very small duck, very impressive size-wise. A range map in Iowa we have them during the breeding season. But they stay around a little bit in the breeding season, so you can see them in the migration season as well. But they won't stay here for the year. They'll go down south. They are the second most abundant duck in the United States as well. Bluewing teal are extremely popular for that reason, especially with hunters. And our smallest North American duck, the cousin of the bluewing teal, is the green-winged teal. This guy is so tiny, he is so adorable. It's fun to see. Just like the mallard and the bluewing teal, the best identifying feature is the coloration on the side, the green stripe on the wing. The males also have a green patch on their face, kind of like the American widgeon does as well, was contrasted with the brown, and they have a dark black bill. And females look like many other female ducks, got the green stripe though, and really small bodied. During this time of year, you can maybe see some Bluewing Teal. I saw some a few weeks ago, but they're probably going to be close to gone now. We have some breeding populations during the breeding season, but they'll also fly south. So, these are the second most hunted duck in the country, so they're also very popular with hunters. And they're smallest dabbling duck. They also do have lamellae on their beak as well that used for filtering food out, so they're also one of our dabbler ducks. All the ducks we've covered so far have been dabblers, just so yeah. Wood duck is a very popular duck with a lot of people. If you don't know the mallard, you probably have heard of a wood duck. A very, very pretty duck. Yeah, the male's a striking beauty. He's got a lot of different facial features. You really can't misidentify them if you see a breeding male out and about. It's just striking. He's got all sorts of different colors. Look like an artist just kind of like took a paintbrush to a duck and got a wood duck. The females, however, do look slightly different than most other female ducks because of the way the wood duck is. It's got that bright white eye ring for the females, so that's a really good way to identify them, as well as kind of their head shape. It's a little bit, I would say, flattened on the top and more sloped on the back, whereas some other ducks it's just like a round head shape. So that's another feature as well. They're a loving couple of ducks. People love to have them. They put wood duck boxes on trees or in their little ponds and stuff to attract them. So their range map, we can have wood ducks year round, which is awesome because we love wood ducks. So they're beautiful. Wood ducks pair up early in January. So with most duck species, what happens is once they have migrated to their wintering grounds, they will actually pair up. Well, yeah, some to most duck species do this, where they'll pair up with another duck once they've gotten to their wintering grounds, and then come breeding season, they will fly together to their breeding grounds, and then they will mate there. And then after the mating season, some ducks stick together. Some can be monogamous. Some just stay for breeding season. Other ones, they just one and done. They breed and then they find somebody else the next season. But wood ducks are especially good at pairing up in January and sticking with their mate up into the breeding grounds later in the season. They're also the only North American duck that regularly produces 2 broods in a year. So that means they can have 2 separate clutches of eggs. So they'll, early in the breeding season, they'll have a nest, they'll lay eggs, and take care of those eggs, and then again later in the breeding season they'll have a second clutch of eggs. Wood ducks are one of our cavity nesting birds. So instead of preparing a nest on either the water surface or somewhere on dry land, they'll actually look for tree cavities that have been holed out by woodpeckers or northern flickers or any kind of like man-made structure that are really popular with people for putting up there. And that's what they'll use to build their nest in. With the hatchlings, once the babies have hatched out of the egg and they're still in the wood duck and still in the cavity or the box that people have, the mother will climb out of the nest and she will sit near the bottom somewhere outside the wood duck, and she'll call to the babies. And she'll just sit there and she'll call to them. She won't help the babies out. The babies have to crawl out of the cavity themselves, jump out, and make it to her. She won't go help them at all. And so sometimes, depending on where that cavity is located in the tree, it can be like a 30-foot drop or a 50-foot drop. And it's just a leap of faith that these babies have to make as soon as they're ready to go. The mother's just like, all right, you can do it. I believe in you. And so there you go. All right, American Coots. Very popular, very prevalent. These are not a duck. They don't look like a duck, but they're seen with ducks. They're more chicken-like, as people have described them. Yeah, you see them a lot with ducks. People mistake them as a duck. Very smaller bodied, waterfowl, pretty much entirely black with the white face. Males and females look very, very similar. These are a picture of 2 hatchlings with, I assume, either a male or a female. They kind of look like fire chickens. They're just very brightly colored. It's babies. We can see American Coots during the breeding season. I guess they can stick around for quite a while. I saw one the other day, Ada Hayden, so I guess we can have some for a while. American Coots are actually closer relatives to sandhill cranes and other rail species than they are to mallards and teal. So they look like ducks. They don't really walk like ducks, and they're definitely not ducks. So. And the other interesting feature with American Coots, which I don't have a great picture of, is their feet structure. So American Coots do not have webbed feet like ducks, even though they spend a lot of time in the water. They actually have long toes and broad lobes on their feet that helps them kick through the water. And these broad lobes on their feet fold back each time the bird lifts its foot, so it doesn't impede its walking on dry land. So they have a very unique foot structure that helps them to swim and to walk on the surface of walk on dry land. Alright, now we're going to get into our diving ducks. So all of the next 9 to 10 duck species we're going to cover are those diving ducks we talked about earlier. So these ducks that really like to get into the water, search for plant material and other insects and fish and stuff on the floor, in the water, and they've got those feet that are more in the hind position of the body. So our first one is the Bufflehead. Very pretty duck. People can confuse these with hooded Mergansers, just because they're known for their kind of unique head shape or coloration. So Buffleheads, the breeding males, look a lot like this. They've got a big white patch on the back of their head with kind of a metallic green or purplish on the face. Short bill with a white belly. As the females or immature males are going to look like this here. They've just got a small white little cheek patch with a black head. This is a picture of a few Buffleheads out in the water. They're a pretty small duck. Not super sizable, but not as tiny as teal are going to be. And we can see these guys during the migration season. And they're also cavity nesters as well. Buffleheads will nest almost exclusively in cavities that have been excavated by northern flickers and pileated woodpeckers. I don't know how prevalent they are in man-made wood dock houses, but they are cavity nesters, so I assume there's a few exceptions to this. The cool, unique thing about Buffleheads is there are Bufflehead fossils that are from the late Pleistocene. It's about 500,000 years ago, and have been found in Alaska, California, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, Texas, and Washington. So these guys date back a while. But even further than that, one California fossil that resembles a modern Bufflehead dates back to about 2 million years ago. So they've been around, or a relative that have been around for a very long time. Canvasbacks. Very pretty duck. These are very unique shape, as you might be able to tell. From other ducks, they kind of have a rounder head shape. The canvasback has a very distinct, kind of flatter top to their head and a very angled head to the beak. That's a great way to identify them, especially when you're looking at a raft that has a lot of canvasbacks and redhead ducks, because they can look similar in plumage. So the males, bright red eye, that red face and neck, with the angled beak to head, with the black and white body shape. Females over brown instead of that bright red they have on the head and neck with the black eye. Both resemble the black bill. And then in Iowa, the lines are kind of faded here. But we can get a few during the winter time, but we get a lot during the migration season. So these guys will stop over from the northern regions, Canada, Minnesota, stuff like that. And they'll fly down here, and they're going south. Yeah. Texas. And this is just a picture of a raft, which is a huge mass of ducks stopping over somewhere, refueling. And the canvasbacks are also very impressive diving ducks. They can dive up to 7 feet under the water, and they have very strong bills, so they will just rip vegetation out from the bottom and take to the surface and eat it there. And in the world of ducks, females abide by the saying, don't put your eggs all in one basket. Some of these ducks abide by the whole brood parasitism, so they will take and lay eggs in other duck species' nests and let them take care of the babies. These other species include redheads and ruddy ducks, will take care of their nests. So, redheads, which we was just talking about. If you're going to confuse a canvasback for any duck, it's going to be a redhead, just because they both have that real prevalent red head with the red neck. Redhead ducks, aptly named, have a bright red head and neck, with kind of a more grayish blue looking beak, yellow eye. They don't have that angled head to beak shape, so they're kind of more of that standard circular, rounder head shape. And then they also have a gray and black body. Female's pretty plain, kind of a white eye ring around the eye, black beak. This is just an image of the ducks flying together over water. They don't really have any super distinct markings on the wings, just kind of a two-tone wing structure, coloration. With their range, we can see them during the winter time. We do have a few breeding areas, it looks like north of here, but they kind of hang out here a lot, it seems like, with the range we have. We have them breeding season, migration, and during the winter time, so you could see some redheads this winter. Just like with the canvasbacks, these redhead ducks also are brood parasites, and so they will lay their eggs in other species' nests and get them to raise their own young. Courtship in pretty much any bird species is going to be very elaborate, very unique. With redheads, it's really cool. The males perform a gymnastic kind of display in which they take their head, and they bend it all the way back to about where their tail is, and then they'll fling it forward while basically like yelling and creating a noise, and that's how they attract their females. And they'll do this over and over again until they get a female to come to their area. So it'd be really cool to see that sometime. And then they're super social ducks, so they're very common to see in large rafts with other duck species. So they're kind of like the larger chickadees of the waterfowl world. So. Ruddy Duck. This is probably my favorite duck. I have not yet get to see one, but I would love to see a male with his bright blue bill. They're just so cute, and they look awesome. So, they're the males. During the breeding season especially, have this super bright blue bill. It's by far the best way to identify them. And they also have this tail that they like to stick up a lot, especially during their mating performances, trying to attract a female. The females, a little bit drabber, strong black bill, kind of have like their heads two-tone, gray and brownish black, but they also have tails that will stick kind of out of the water. And they're a smaller duck species. The range map for these guys is kind of just like the redhead we just saw, where they have some breeding species that they've seen, a lot of migration, and kind of a weird curve where they stay for the winter. I guess that might follow an area with a lot of wetlands or like open bodies of water where they can stay during those cold times of the year. So this picture here, the male, he's actually doing his courtship behavior, and where the male takes his bill, throws it against his neck, and then will shoot it forward while breathing out, creating these bubbles in the water. And he'll stick his tail up. And he does that to attract the female. So he beats it against his chest and raises it, creating this little pocket of air bubbles out of the water. They're very aggressive little ducks. So they will be super aggressive toward other species of ducks during the breeding season. They've also been known to chase rabbits out of like nearby wetlands or like off the like edge of the, not edge of the water, but like along the edge of the water. They're just like super aggressive little guys during the breeding season. But they get it back because karma is fantastic, and so they get harassed by horned grebes, high-billed grebes, and American coots during their breeding season. The grebes especially perform this tactic called submarining, where they'll go under the water and they will come up and shoot out of the water underneath the ruddy duck to scare him. So, yeah, they're aggressive. Next we have our ringneck ducks, which are interestingly named. The best identifying factor of the ringneck duck is the ring around the beak. There's one here towards the head, and there's also a later one towards the tip of the beak. The female has this one along the tip of the beak as well. Bright yellow eye, black and whitish gray contrast. The ringneck duck is actually named because it does have a ring around its neck. It is not the one here around the bill. It's actually a layer of darker brown feathers that's almost indistinguishable right along the base of the neck. So it's really hard to see. You don't ever really see it, but that is how they were named. Thus the ringneck duck. During the fall migration, ringneck ducks can form like insane flocks, just massive flocks of birds. Several 100,000 congregate each fall on certain lakes in Minnesota to feed on wild rice. This is one of their favorite foods to eat. So if you go up to Minnesota during the migration, you can see thousands and thousands of these ducks just sitting together on rice fields. The range map we get looks like they're all pretty much migrants that come to this area. The lighter color, breeding grounds maybe. I don't know what that color on the map is. They didn't really key that color out very well. But
They give the same like sparse breeding.
out
Saw another one.
so, yeah. Common Goldeneye. So these guys are named because of their very golden eye color, which we've seen in a few other species. But these guys just very bright yellow. It's very distinct for them. The males, green, almost triangular shaped head with this white patch right below between the eye and the bill, which is very prevalent in breeding males. And then the black and white contrasting body, whereas the females have kind of a orange tip to the beak, also still have that really bright golden eye and brown head. We can see them in the winter time. They just kind of stick around here. They breed way far north, up in upper reaches of Canada. So they come down here and they'll hang out during the winter time. This is another image of a male doing a breeding tactic. Like we talked earlier, these guys also perform that gymnastic display. Stick their head all the way back towards her butt, fling it forward and scream at her. And she's supposed to really like that. So. The female goldeneyes also as well are brood parasites, and so they will lay their eggs in other ducks' nests. Specifically, I think goldeneyes. They don't really tend to go out of their own species, but they will put it in other goldeneyes' nests. Hunters have dubbed the goldeneyes, have given them the nickname the whistler duck, because of distinct whistling sounds on their wings when they're in flight. When they're in flight, they just make this real high-pitched whistle sound as the wind goes over their wings. Cold weather especially accentuates this sound. So during really cold times of the year and they're flying during migration and it's really cold, you can definitely hear this whistling sound. With the eyes are really special with the common goldeneyes. They actually go through like a phase. So when they are young, the common goldeneyes actually are ground purple. When they hatch, they slowly turn to like a purple bluish, and then to blue, and then green blue. And then by the time they're 5 months of age, they become clear, pale green yellow, and then they get that distinct bright yellow, the males do, when he's in his breeding plumage. Bright yellow males, and then it's a pale yellow to waiting females. So they have like 6 to 7 eye colors throughout their lifetime, which is crazy. Hooded Mergansers. So these, if you remember, the Bufflehead was the first diving duck we talked about. They can be confused with hooded Mergansers just because they're both known for their unique head coloration and structure. Hooded Merganser, aptly named because they have this giant hood in the back of their head, especially the males, used for breeding and attracting females. Just poof this guy up. This is when it's at rest, and this is when they're trying to attract a female during the breeding season. Take those feathers and they poof them up, and it's just this big white fan surrounded by black. And then they also have a brown and white and black body contrast. And the females also have this huge mass of feathers on the back of her head. So as the immature males, but they don't really have the coloration that the males do. With Iowa, we can see them in the breeding season, and on the eastern part, we can see them we can have them year round. So probably big lakes like Lake McBride out east. If you're from that area, you might be able to see some. Oops, sorry. Hooded Mergansers also brood parasites. Seems like a lot of these diving ducks are not very good, I wouldn't say very good mothers, but they just like to leave and put their eggs in other people's nests. So And hooded mergansers are extremely good at searching underwater. They have extremely good eyesight, and so they can change the refractive property of their eyes to improve their visual quality underwater, so they can search for prey and plant matter. And they have an extra eyelid called a nictitating membrane, which is transparent and helps protect their eye from swimming. So basically, they have a built-in pair of goggles to use when they're swimming. And just like with the wood ducks, once the babies are ready to go and they've hatched out their eggs, and then you leave the cavity, they will also jump out of the nest. And the mother won't help them all, she'll call to them, and they have to jump out of their nest and make it to them. Common mergansers, another merganser family. These guys, very prevalent, we can see them during the winter time. Males kind of just got that long, saw-like, skinny bill with the green head, and the females kind of have a red head with that long, saw-like bill. The saw-like bill is extremely prevalent with common mergansers, so that's the best way to identify them, just having a long, skinny bill. They're extremely good for catching fish. A lot of sharp teeth in there that will help clasp down their prey, and so fish are a definite favorite of these guys. This is an example of some of the chicks on the mother. I was fortunate enough to be up in Wisconsin and Minnesota this summer, and you see these guys all the time. The mother will just be swimming down like the rivers or the rapids, and the babies will just follow behind or sit on the back of her. This is really cool to see. And we have these guys during the winter time. Like I talked with the bill, also called sawbills. It's another nickname for these guys just because they have all those sharp teeth used for eating fish. And then if you see any gulls trailing flocks of common mergansers, it's because they're waiting to steal food from them as well. Lesser scaups. There's two species of scaups that we'll talk about, lesser scaups and greater scaups. This is the lesser of the two. The males, almost pretty similar to the females. Bright yellow eye, pretty much entirely black head and neck with their bill. The best way to identify breeding males is by that braccation at about 3.8 million. So they are a very numerous duck across the world. And the chicks of the lesser scaups do not like to waste any time. They're also very efficient. So as soon as their down dries, they go underneath the water. And the little ones are a little bit too buoyant, so they don't stay down for very long. By the time they're about 5 to 7 weeks old, they can dive for 25 seconds and swim underwater for 60 feet. So it's pretty impressive little ones. The greater scaup, so the greater of the two species. If you look between the two, it looks pretty similar. Breeding males kind of have more of a greenish metallic color to the head, but also you're going to see a lot of black with that bright yellow eye, and then same kind of body feature with the wings and the contrasting black and white. And the female looks very close to the male. The best distinguishing feature for the scaups is the head shape. So lesser scaups have a tall peaked head, whereas greater scaups have a shorter rounded head. So no one's gonna be mad at you if you misidentify these guys, because they look pretty similar. So, and these guys are excellent diving ducks and regularly go down 20 plus feet into water to look for different kinds of food and plant matter. And then the females, when she's building her nest, it's usually lined with a thick layer of down plucked from her feathers. But in poor conditions, when her down isn't very prevalent, instead the nest may contain small grayish white feathers that she's plucked from the outer body feathers. So she's sacrificing her internal warmth that she has built in and using that to provide a soft place to lay her eggs, keep them warm. And then we can see them during the migration season here in Iowa. Okay. Oh, we're into the geese. Okay, we're done with ducks now. So these are going to be some of our other waterfowl. It won't take as long, but we've got a few geese species and a couple swans that we'll go through. Canada geese. You guys are all probably very familiar with Canada geese. We have them all over the place. Thanks to a great conservation effort, Canada geese were once almost extinct, but they were brought back, and now they are extremely prevalent everywhere. So, Super tall neck, black neck, white patch on the face, and then black eye and beak. Very large bird. They exhibit assorted mating, and so they will look for mates that are the same size as them. So if I'm a 5'8" human being exhibiting assorted mating, I will look for another person that is 5'8". I don't care if they're 6'5" or 5'2". If they're not 5'8", I don't want it. So, some migratory populations of Canada geese do not travel very far south. This is thought to be because of climate change and warming, different temperatures warming, but also with agricultural practices where farmers are leaving a lot more waste grain in the fields. So that's what geese will feed on during the non-breeding season. And we have these guys year round. Lucky us. Next we have our cackling goose. It's a lot smaller species of goose, once thought to be a subspecies, but then it was dubbed its own individual species because of genetic difference. So these guys are a lot smaller than your Canada goose. Here in this picture we have cackling goose and our Canada goose, about almost half the size, a lot smaller. They're named because of their call, which is a great way to identify them. They just have more of a cackling call or sound versus your standard honking by the Canada goose. They have stubbier bills, steeper foreheads, shorter necks usually, which is very apparent when they're flying because they stick their heads out, and their heads are usually more rounded. So the best way to identify them is just either comparing to other geese in the flock or just listening to them. And then we have these guys during the wintertime as well. Greater white-fronted geese. These guys are pretty cool. They're a different visual break from other geese species. These guys are distinguished with the white front, hence greater white-fronted, in front of their beak, between the eye and the beak, and then pretty drab overall brown body. Some have different overall color morphs. With these guys, they can be a darker brown, some can be like a paler. So they have different kind of plumages. Greater white-fronted goose pairs stay together for years and migrate together. So very few bird species are monogamous, but the greater white-fronted geese kind of are monogamous. They might not stay together for their entire lifetime, but they will stay together for many seasons. And the parents and sibling association may continue through their lives. So siblings not always disperse. After they have grown up, they will sometimes stay with the mother and father for like a year or two. So. Snow geese. Snow geese and Ross's geese are two geese that are very small. People get them very confused sometimes. Snow goose is a little bit larger, I believe, from the Ross's goose. The best way to identify these guys is kind of a black patch on their beak. And then the snow goose also employs a feeding technique where they'll stick their head into like mud and stuff looking for vegetation. So it kind of stains their feathers and to look more of a yellowish color. Whereas the Ross's goose, which we'll show next, is usually a very white head, doesn't employ that same kind of feeding technique. So this is Ross's goose I was just talking about. So yeah. These guys look pretty similar, a little bit shorter, stubbier, don't have that black part on the beak. Now our swans, Tundra Swan, it's a species we don't commonly see, but we can have them during the migration season. They look very similar to Tundra Swans, except they're smaller. The ones that we have here, it's a subspecies, they have this little yellow spot real close to the eye. It's the best way to identify them. Another subspecies of Tundra Swan, they have a huge yellow patch between the beak and the eye. We don't typically see those guys. These are what we predominantly see when we have them around here. Lewis and Clark actually provided the first written description of Tundra Swans during their expedition to the west, where their whistle-like calls got them to be dubbed the whistling swans instead of the Tundra Swans. And then swans, as we know with newt swans, have been associated with ideas of romance. In addition to their elegant outlines and all-white plumage, they also tend to form permanent bonds, almost like monogamous couples, and they will stay together for many breeding seasons. And they will also roost together. Trumpeter Swan is much more prevalent in Iowa than our Tundra Swan we just talked about. These guys will have during the breeding season. They'll stay around for quite a while as well. These guys, a lot larger. Well, not a lot, but they're distinctly larger than the Tundra Swans. They don't have that yellow spot in the eye. Black beak, black eye, and then beautiful white body. They're our biggest native waterfowl, stretching to 6 feet in length and weighing more than 25 pounds, so almost twice as big as the Tundra Swan. And to get off the water, Tundra Swans also need a runway. And so as they're running along the water and flapping their wings, it kind of sounds like thunder or like clapping. It's just like a lot of Tundra Swans taking off, Trumpeter Swans taking off. It's just like a super loud noise as they're flapping their wings and running across the water, so it's impressive. Fun fact, so the Trumpeter Swan got its name because its species name, Bufflehead, that is actually, it's a muscle. And it's the same muscle we have in our cheeks that we use when we're like playing the trumpet or like blowing out candles. And so they're named Trumpeter because of the association with the muscle and the muscle we have. Kind of strange, but it's a little fun thing. Mute swans. Mute swans are not native to the United States. They have been brought over because they look beautiful. People like to have them like ponds and lakes and stuff like that. We have 2 of these guys in Lake Laverne, Lancelot and Elaine. These guys are what people really think about when it comes to romance. They're very elegant birds, so it's not often you're going to see them just like in random lakes or ponds that aren't like in an urban setting, but there is a chance. So typically when people bring these to like zoos or like their own area, they're going to clip their wings so they can't leave, and so they won't leave very often. Alright, and that concludes the identification portion.